Specialists uncover an 1847 daguerreotype of a couple. When they enlarge the image, they are stunned by what emerges. A soft rain tapped against the windows of the Metropolitan Museum of Art as Dr. Carmen Rodriguez neared the end of cataloguing the final box from the Harrison Williams bequest. It was a gloomy Tuesday in November, and the historical photography expert had just wrapped up 3 weeks of painstakingly reviewing every piece of the vast collection, donated after the death of Mrs. Eleanor Harrison Williams. One last box, and I'm finished for the day, Carmen murmured, adjusting the white cotton gloves meant to protect fragile historical artifacts. At 42, she had devoted her life to studying 19th-century photography, yet she had never lost the thrill of unearthing hidden gems within private collections. Opening a small, navy blue velvet box, she discovered a perfectly preserved daguerreotype. The silver-plated copper plate shimmered under her workstation's specialized lights, still encased in its original glass that had weathered more than a century and a half. Carmen felt a jolt of excitement. Daguerreotypes from 1847 were exceptionally rare in the United States, especially ones in such fine condition. The image showed a youthful couple, a man around 30 with a neatly trimmed mustache, and a woman with dark hair swept back into an elegant bun. Both were dressed in formal period attire, but something in their expressions immediately caught Carmen's eye. They lacked the usual rigid formality of portraits from that era. Their faces revealed a closeness and warmth uncommon in official photographs of the time. Fascinating, Carmen whispered, reaching for her magnifying glass. Very fascinating. After 2 decades examining historical photographs, she had cultivated a keen instinct for recognizing exceptional pieces. This daguerreotype held something different, something she couldn't yet explain. On the back of the box, she located a tiny handwritten label with faded ink, New York, 1847, JM and MC. The initials were written in elegant yet trembling calligraphy, as if the writer had been anxious or excited. Carmen felt her pulse quicken. Something about that image told her she had uncovered more than just a simple family portrait. The next morning, Carmen arrived early at the museum's digital restoration lab. The lead technician, Miguel Santos, had already prepped the high-resolution scanning gear they used to digitize the collection's most precious pieces. Morning, Carmen. What's the special find today? Miguel asked as he fine-tuned the professional scanner settings. At 35, Miguel was regarded as one of the nation's top art digitization experts, and his partnership with Carmen had already led to several major discoveries. An 1847 daguerreotype I found yesterday in the Harrison Williams donation, Carmen replied, carefully placing the piece onto the scanning table. There's something unusual about it, Miguel. The image quality is remarkable for the period, and the couple's expression is striking. Miguel examined the piece through his own magnifying glass. You're right. The level of detail is impressive. Whoever took this was a master of the daguerreotype process. Let's scan it at 4000 dpi to capture every tiny detail. For the next 40 minutes, the scanner worked meticulously, capturing every fiber, every reflection, every shadow of the historic daguerreotype. Carmen watched with the patience of someone who had done this hundreds of times, but with the excitement of someone who sensed something extraordinary was about to surface. Ready, Miguel announced. Now, let's see what digital enlargement reveals. On the 32-inch screen appeared the high-resolution digitized image. Carmen leaned in, studying every detail intently. She immediately noticed elements invisible to the naked eye. The texture of the woman's dress showed intricate embroidery, and the man's brooch displayed a complex heraldic design. Miguel, can you zoom in on the man's brooch area? Carmen asked. When he did, the small brooch expanded to fill a large portion of the screen. What they saw left them speechless, a perfectly detailed heraldic shield, which Carmen recognized at once. It can't be, Carmen murmured, moving closer to the screen. That crest? I need to make some urgent calls. Carmen spent the next 3 hours in the museum's specialized library, surrounded by volumes on 19th-century American heraldry. The yellowed pages of old books creaked under her fingers as she desperately searched for any reference to the crest she had seen on the daguerreotype's brooch. Asterisk, here it is, asterisk, she finally exclaimed, pointing to an illustration in the asterisk armorial of New York's noble families from 1834 star. The heraldic shield was identical, a rampant lion on a gold field, topped with a ducal crown, and a Latin inscription reading asterisk veritas it on a star. The crest belonged to the Mendoza Carvajal family, one of the oldest and most influential aristocratic houses that had emigrated to America from Spain. Carmen's heart raced as she read the family's description. The Mendoza Carvajals had been advisors to Spanish royalty for centuries. In 1847, the year of the daguerreotype, the family heir in New York was Don Joaquin Mendoza Carvajal, age 31. Asterisk, JM, asterisk, Carmen whispered, recalling the handwritten initials on the box. Asterisk, Joaquin Mendoza. Asterisk, but who was asterisk MC asterisk? She continued digging and found something that left her perplexed. According to official records, Don Joaquin Mendoza Carvajal had died unmarried in 1851 with no known descendants. However, other documents hinted at a scandalous romance that had been carefully erased from the family's official history. Carmen decided to consult Professor Eduardo Ramirez, the most respected historian of 19th-century America, who regularly collaborated with the museum. Professor Ramirez, 73, had spent his life studying American aristocratic families and knew secrets that had never been published. Asterisk, Professor, I need your help with something delicate, asterisk, Carmen told him over the phone. Asterisk, I believe I found an 1847 daguerreotype of Don Joaquin Mendoza Carvajal, but he appears with a woman I can't identify. Asterisk. Silence on the other end stretched for several seconds. Finally, Professor Ramirez replied in a carefully controlled voice, asterisk, Carmen, can you come to my office immediately? There are aspects of the Mendoza Carvajal story that have never been made public. Asterisk. Professor Ramirez's office was on the top floor of a historic building in Greenwich Village. Carmen climbed the worn marble stairs, anticipation building with each step. The 19th-century building's walls seemed to hold secrets, much like the photograph she carried carefully in her portfolio. Asterisk, Carmen, please come in. Asterisk, Professor Ramirez greeted her, an elegant man with completely white hair and piercing blue eyes. His office was a labyrinth of old books, historical documents, and portraits of aristocratic families that seemed to watch from the walls. Asterisk, Professor, before I show you the photograph, I need to know what you know about Don Joaquin Mendoza Carvajal's personal life, asterisk, Carmen asked, sitting in a vintage leather chair across from his desk. Professor Ramirez poured himself tea and remained silent for several minutes, as if carefully deciding what to reveal. Asterisk, Carmen, what I'm about to tell you has never been officially published. Don Joaquin Mendoza Carvajal had a romance with a woman who didn't belong to the aristocracy. She was extraordinarily beautiful and intelligent, but her social origins made the relationship completely unacceptable to his family. Asterisk. Asterisk, do you know her name? Asterisk, Carmen asked, feeling she was nearing the truth. Asterisk, Maria Carmen Delgado Vega. She was the daughter of a humble textile merchant but had received an excellent education. She worked as a governess for wealthy families, asterisk, the professor said, rising to search for a document in one of his private filing cabinets. Carmen felt a chill. Asterisk, MC, Maria Carmen. The initials on the box match perfectly. Asterisk. Asterisk, exactly. Now show me that photograph, asterisk, said the professor, his voice a mixture of excitement and solemnity. Carmen carefully extracted the high-resolution print of the daguerreotype and placed it on the desk. Professor Ramirez put on his glasses and examined the image for several minutes. Asterisk, extraordinary, asterisk, he finally murmured. Asterisk, this photograph is the only visual evidence that exists of their relationship. Carmen, do you realize what you have here? This daguerreotype was likely taken in secret, almost like a symbolic marriage between them. Asterisk. Asterisk, what happened to Maria Carmen? Asterisk asked Carmen, though she suspected the answer would be painful. Professor Ramirez removed his glasses and looked directly at her. Asterisk, Maria Carmen mysteriously disappeared in 1848. Nothing was ever heard from her again. Don Joaquin fell into a deep depression and died 3 years later, supposedly from tuberculosis, though there are rumors he died of a broken heart. Asterisk. The next day, Carmen and Professor Ramirez headed to the New York City Archives, housed in an imposing neoclassical building near City Hall. The archivist who received them, Isabel Marino, was a 50-year-old woman with an impeccable reputation in historical records research. Asterisk, Professor Ramirez, it's a pleasure to see you again, asterisk, Isabel greeted, leading them to the specialized consultation room. Asterisk, your message yesterday intrigued me greatly. It's very rare to request information about people who disappeared in the 19th century. Asterisk. Carmen explained in detail the discovery of the daguerreotype and the connection to Maria Carmen Delgado Vega. Isabel listened attentively, taking notes in her specialized notebook. Asterisk, Maria Carmen Delgado Vega, asterisk, Isabel repeated, consulting her digitized archive system. Asterisk, let's see what we find, birth records, but let me search the more sensitive documents. Asterisk. For the next 2 hours, Isabel meticulously reviewed old files, parish records, and municipal documents preserved for centuries. Carmen watched with fascination, knowing each document could hold the key to solving the mystery. Asterisk, here's something very interesting, asterisk, Isabel finally announced, pointing to a handwritten document dated March 1848. Asterisk, it's a record from St. Paul's Chapel. Maria Carmen Delgado Vega requested documents to travel to France. Asterisk. Carmen and Professor Ramirez exchanged significant glances. Asterisk, France? Why France? Asterisk, Carmen asked. Asterisk, according to this record, Maria Carmen stated she had family in Paris and needed to travel urgently for family reasons. But there's a marginal note that says, verify with higher authorities, asterisk, Isabel continued. Asterisk, but the most disturbing part is in another document. Here's a police record from April 1848. Maria Carmen was last seen at an inn near the Canadian border, but she never crossed. Her belongings were found abandoned, including a letter that was never sent. Asterisk. Asterisk, what did the letter say? Asterisk, Professor Ramirez asked urgently. Isabel consulted another document and read, asterisk, the letter was addressed to someone called J.M. It said, my love, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't reach our meeting place. You know our love is stronger than your family's threats. I'll wait for you in Paris until you can join me. Forever yours, M.C. Asterisk. Carmen realized that Joaquin and Maria Carmen had planned a romantic escape, but someone had prevented Maria Carmen from reaching France. The most mysterious part, the Mendoza Carvajal family had officially reported that Maria Carmen had arrived safely in France, while police records told a completely different story. Days later, Carmen managed to locate Pilar Ruiz Morales, 85 years old, whose great-great-grandmother, Esperanza, had worked as a cook in the Mendoza Carvajal household during that time. Carmen visited her at the Sunset Manor nursing home on the Upper West Side. Asterisk, Mrs. Ruiz, we're historical researchers investigating the 19th century Mendoza Carvajal family, asterisk, Carmen explained carefully. Pilar's eyes immediately lit up. Asterisk, the Mendoza Carvajals. My great-great-grandmother Esperanza worked for them for many years. She always said they had done terrible things, but she never wanted to give details until she was dying. Asterisk. Asterisk, what exactly did she tell you? Asterisk, Professor Ramirez asked. Pilar sat silent for several minutes, as if deciding whether to share a story she had kept for decades. Asterisk, my great-great-grandmother told me that in April 1848, 3 men brought a young woman to the Mendoza Carvajal house in the middle of the night. The woman was unconscious but alive. Asterisk. Carmen's heart raced. Asterisk, what happened to that woman? Asterisk. Asterisks, according to my great-great-grandmother, the woman was taken to a room in the basement. Esperanza saw her briefly and said she was very beautiful, with dark hair, dressed in traveling clothes. Most importantly, the woman wore a small medallion with the initials MC. Esperanza had to take food to the basement for 3 days. The woman was alive but very ill. She cried constantly and repeated a name, Joaquin. On the fourth day, when Esperanza went down with food, the room was empty. Asterisk. Asterisk, what happened to Maria Carmen? Asterisk, Professor Ramirez asked. Asterisk, my great-great-grandmother never knew for certain. But that night, she saw the family's men loading something heavy into a carriage. Esperanza overheard a conversation mentioning the old Woodlawn Cemetery and that no one would ever find her there. Asterisk. Carmen realized they had uncovered evidence of what was likely a kidnapping and possibly a murder. After obtaining Pilar Ruiz Morales' official testimony, Carmen contacted Dr. Laura Mendizabal, a forensic archaeologist from Columbia University specializing in historical investigations. Asterisk, Carmen, what you're telling me is extraordinary, asterisk, Laura told her during a meeting at the archaeology lab. Asterisk, if we actually find physical evidence, this could rewrite part of 19th century American social history. Asterisk. For 2 weeks, Carmen worked tirelessly to secure the necessary permits from the city and the Department of Historical Heritage. The Daguerreotype, historical testimonies, and Pilar's statement provided sufficient grounds to justify the investigation. On a cold December morning, Carmen, Laura, and a small team of archaeologists headed to the old section of Woodlawn Cemetery. The cemetery, partially abandoned during the 20th century, still preserved many old 19th century graves. Asterisk, according to the testimonies, Maria Carmen would have been buried in a remote section, probably without an official marker, asterisk, Laura explained while examining historic site plans. The team used ground-penetrating radar to scan the terrain for anomalies that could indicate unmarked burials. After 3 days of meticulous searching, they found several irregularities in a remote section. Asterisk, Carmen, we found something, asterisk, Laura announced on the 4th day. Asterisk, there's evidence of a burial that doesn't correspond with the cemetery's official records. The depth and type of soil disturbance suggest it was done hastily. Asterisk. With extreme care, the team began excavation. Carmen watched with a mixture of scientific excitement and human sadness, knowing they might be about to find the remains of Maria Carmen Delgado Vega. After several hours of painstaking work, Laura made a discovery that left the entire team speechless. Asterisk, Carmen, come here immediately. Asterisk. At the bottom of the excavation, partially preserved by soil conditions, lay a human skeleton. But what made Carmen feel a chill was what they found next to the remains, a small silver medallion, blackened by time. After delicate cleaning, the medallion revealed its secret. Engraved in the silver were the initials *MC* in elegant 19th century calligraphy. Forensic analyses confirmed Carmen's worst suspicions. Dr. Laura Mendizabal found clear evidence that Maria Carmen Delgado Vega had died from cranial trauma caused by a blunt object. Carbon-14 studies confirmed the death occurred between 1848 and 1850, perfectly matching the timeline of her disappearance. Carmen decided it was time to make the story public. She organized a press conference at the Metropolitan Museum of Art to present all her findings. News of the discovery had begun to leak in academic circles, and several media outlets had expressed interest. Asterisk, ladies and gentlemen, asterisk, Carmen began in front of cameras and journalists gathered in the museum's conference room. Asterisk, what began as a simple cataloging of a donation has become the discovery of one of the most tragic and criminal love stories of 19th century America. Asterisk. Carmen methodically presented all the evidence, the original daguerreotype, historical documents, archive testimonies, Pilar Ruiz Morales' statement, and finally the remains and medallion found in Woodlawn Cemetery. Asterisk, the evidence is conclusive, asterisk, Carmen continued. Asterisk, Maria Carmen Delgado Vega was kidnapped on orders of the Mendoza Carvajal family when she tried to meet Don Joaquin in France. She was held in the family house for several days and subsequently murdered to prevent her relationship with the family heir from becoming public. Asterisk. Professor Ramirez added historical context. Asterisk, this case perfectly illustrates how 19th century aristocratic families used their power and influence to control not only family fortunes but also the lives and destinies of people they considered threats to their social position. Asterisk. A reporter asked, asterisk, Dr. Rodriguez, what happened to Don Joaquin after Maria Carmen's disappearance? Asterisk. According to our investigations, Don Joaquin never knew the truth, Carmen replied. His family made him believe she had reached France and decided to start a new life there. Joaquin spent the rest of his short life waiting for news from her and died in 1851 without knowing she had been murdered by his own family. After the press conference, Carmen received intimidating calls from lawyers representing current descendants of the Mendoza Carvajal family, but she stood firm. Maria Carmen deserves to have her story known. Her memory is not for sale. 6 months later, Carmen laid the final stone on a monument that New York City had authorized to honor the memory of Maria Carmen Delgado Vega. The monument, located in a renovated section of Woodlawn Cemetery, bore an inscription Carmen had written personally. Maria Carmen Delgado Vega, 1817 to 1848. Her love was stronger than the conventions of her time, and her memory outlasts the power that tried to silence her. The original daguerreotype now had a place of honor in the Metropolitan Museum's permanent exhibition, accompanied by the full story Carmen had uncovered. Thousands of visitors came to see the photograph and learn of the love story that had defied the social barriers of the 19th century. Carmen, you've achieved something extraordinary, Professor Ramirez told her during the monument's inauguration. You haven't just solved a historical mystery, you've given voice to a victim who had been silenced for more than 170 years. Pilar Ruiz Morales, now 86, insisted on attending. My great-great-grandmother can finally rest in peace, she told Carmen with tears in her eyes. Esperanza would be proud to know her testimony served to bring justice. The story had repercussions far beyond academia. Several historians began investigating other similar cases of power abuse by 19th-century aristocratic families. Maria Carmen's case opened a national conversation about how official history had often hidden injustices committed by privileged classes. Carmen received offers from international universities to continue her research but decided to stay in New York to establish a foundation dedicated to investigating historical cases of unsolved disappearances. Maria Carmen can't be the only person whose story was erased by power, Carmen declared in an interview for National Geographic Star. The daguerreotype had revealed much more than a simple love story. It had exposed a system of oppression that allowed powerful families to act as judges, juries, and executioners when their interests were threatened. On a spring afternoon, Carmen was in her office examining the daguerreotype once more when she noticed something she had overlooked during months of investigation. In the background of the photograph, barely visible in a corner, was a small inscription engraved on the copper plate, *Forever J and MC. Carmen smiled, realizing that Joaquin and Maria Carmen had found a way to be together for eternity. Their love, captured in that 1847 photograph, had survived not only death but also every attempt to erase it from history. The daguerreotype had fulfilled its mission. After more than 170 years of silence, it had shouted the truth to the world. Joaquin Mendoza Carvajal and Maria Carmen Delgado Vega had demonstrated that true love is more powerful than any social convention, and that truth, though late, always finds a way to emerge. The story became a symbol of historical justice and inspired a new generation of researchers to question official narratives and seek the voices silenced by power. Carmen had established an important precedent: victims of the past deserve to be remembered, and no crime, however old, should go unpunished. Museums around the world requested loans of the daguerreotype for exhibitions on social history and human rights. The photograph had become a universal symbol of love that transcends social barriers and of the courage needed to seek truth. Carmen carefully closed the case file, knowing she had completed not just an academic investigation but a mission of historical justice. The daguerreotype of the mysterious couple from 1847 had finally revealed its secret. And that secret had forever changed how we understand the power of love and the importance of preserving the memory of those unjustly silenced by history. Maria Carmen and Joaquin, separated in life by social conventions and family cruelty, had found in death the justice and recognition denied to them in life. Their eternal love, captured forever on a silver-plated copper plate, would continue inspiring future generations to fight for truth and justice, no matter how much time had passed.